willing to have a little fun.
Well, I don't know.
I,
I've heard that.
I see, like, I don't think of any of this stuff, although I know, you know, the fine artists, the best artists do, okay? I don't aspire to be the best artist, because there's no way that is gonna happen for me. But, so I find this fascinating. My approach is just to throw things down the way it feels to me. I got a painting in here, could you look at it and critique it and tell me everything I've done wrong from your viewpoint?
I could give you my opinion about it.
Just like real quick?
Yeah, one second.
Sure.
I want to mention something based on what you said earlier and kind of what you're saying now as a caveat to all of this, because I didn't really talk about my style this evening or anything, or classical realism and how that differs and all that from other types. I'm a pretty eclectic person when it comes to art, music, decorating, lots of things. I like lots of different styles. There are bands, or there's musicians that it sounds like that they spent, and a lot of them have, 6 months or a year in a studio, and maybe they write a song, and then maybe they get a group of writers together, and they go over and over and over and over, and they go in the studio, and they manipulate the drum tracks and the vocals and all of this, and the guitars, and just work with it. And sometimes there's bands that do that very masterfully and come up with a masterpiece that took a long time, and that it's good. There's other types of music, like the Rolling Stones, for example, that it doesn't sound like that. Now, I don't know, maybe they do, but it sounds like they got together and wrote out a song in about half an hour and recorded the thing, and it sounds good most of the time. But this is something that another thing. I know you and I talked about. I think we talked about this subject. I know we talked about the book Forgery of Venus, and in the book Forgery of Venus, he uses at times this Italian word sprezzatura. And sprezzatura, what that means is it's someone who does something with such proficiency and excellence in a nonchalant way that it looks like it was done with no effort. Like maybe a Jimi Hendrix or a Eddie Van Halen, or maybe the way John Singer Sargent probably would wield a paintbrush. It looks like they're not even trying, and they're just like either, painting something, or they're playing and singing, and it looks like they're not trying, but it's beautiful in whatever way that is. And that opens up a whole aesthetic can of worms there, because some of these scenes, this was not, a lot of people wouldn't say it's an actually ugly picture. It's intended, a lot of this, to be ugly. But I think that you can write an ugly song or paint an ugly picture or whatever in a beautiful or truthful way. And not everything that I paint, or that if I were a serious songwriter, would be "You Are My Sunshine" or whatever. It would be, life is not that way. There's dark and there's bad times and good times in life, and I try to deal with both of those things. Not everything is macabre or dark and depressing, but sometimes that they are.
So were you basically trying to make the distinction between the type of art you do and classical realism,
Yeah,
with other people like surrealism, impressionism,
just like there's
abstractism?
a whole
It's
slew
just
of
as valid.
genres of
Yeah.
music and movies and everything else. There's all different kinds of stuff, and so not everything conforms to
Right,
this.
right. The same rules
Yeah.
don't. I mean, like you've said, there are principles.
Some of it,
Light and dark, good composition.
all of this stuff that I've talked about is good guidelines to use, whether you're designing a website, or you're decorating a room, or writing a song, or doing anything. Everything in life is creative and psychology, really. I remember I spoke to a school one time, and this kid helped me carry in some paintings, and he said, "The only reason I'm helping you is to get out of class." He said, "I don't care about art, and I think it's a big waste of time, and I don't think it has anything to do with my life."
that's fine.
So, when I got in there, I said, you know, what's his name? He helped me carry the paintings, and this is what he said. I said, but he might not have noticed this whole school. Somebody designed it, an architect designed that, an interior designer, you know, figured out how everything was going to be laid out here. Somebody designed that desk he's sitting in. Somebody designed his shoes, his pants, his shirt, and his haircut. Everything that he has and is, an artist of some kind designed it, you know. And so, but so many of these things are, again, on an unconscious level, and people aren't even realizing how they're affected by art, or by, you know, that somebody had an idea, had a vision, and people don't even know that, you know, get into the whole art imitating life and vice versa thing. Yeah, right. So thank you guys for listening. I'll be happy to look at your picture.
I want to hear.
I got a couple of questions.
Okay. Yeah.
Of course, I don't know how you paint, and I know how you set up, but let's say, like I do, I just take a picture of something, and I have to work off my picture. I can't leave something set up for a month or two or whatever. So let's say I'm gonna set up a still life like this one or this one down here.
Yeah.
Well, either one of those three.
Okay.
And I take a picture of that.
Okay.
Now, I'm getting ready to work, and you say, first of all, you'll put your paint on real heavy on your canvas. Would you gesso real heavy first?
I don't use gesso.
You
I mean,
don't?
these are oils, and I just paint directly onto the linen with oil paint.
Okay.
No, I don't. The paint, the canvases or linen's already primed, pre-primed when I get it. But then basically I'm kind of priming it with oil paint as I put down my first layer. And I didn't mention this, but there's layer upon layer upon layer upon layer that get thinner as they reach the surface. It's called fat over lean. And so, again, I try to keep my darks very thin, and I end up building up what's called impasto, and building up my lights. You'll notice the whites or the real bright stuff is more textured, which, again, bringing it back to music, when you know, somebody that's a vocalist, you've got, you know, more of your true voice or natural voice that tends to sound warmer. But if you really want to push a high note, you go into falsetto, and you add rasp to it. In other words, you add texture to that, and you can end up hitting a lot higher note. The paint only comes so bright, but sometimes you need to raise that note up. You're trying to hit this high note here, and so you do kind of the same thing, or I do. I texture a little bit. I add rasp, I add grit or texture to it. It causes the light to catch it more, and it ends up raising that note sometimes, you know, 2 or 3 notches in the value scale.
So you build up the oil paint just in that area?
Just in that, if I'm trying to,
What do you use for medium?
I use I think Winsor Newton or Grumbacher. I use a lot of different ones. I've used poppy seed oil. I've used linseed oil. I tend to not because it's bad about yellowing, but I've tried to lick one. I think I usually just use something called Winsor Newton medium. I think is
Okay.
what it is. But sometime you can come by the studio. I just at the moment I can't remember what it is, but I do use it in. It's called fat over lean, and so like sometimes there's colors that you're trying to hit or notes, because basically that's what you're trying to do, hit a note. There's a difference. You can just mix up a color and paint it on there and get a look, but a lot of times that's not going to be near as interesting or real or in depth as putting down a color. Like say I'm trying to paint my arm here or something, or somebody's arm, and I want to get that look of that vein going up in my arm. You know, I could try to match that color and paint it, but I'm probably going to do some stuff like putting down a color, kind of a blue-green subdued color, a little bright, and then coming over that later after it's dry with a glaze of a fleshy color over that, where you see that blue-green underneath it, that gives it that texture and depth and that is a whole lot different than just hitting the color and all of it being on the same level. I don't know, did I answer your question?
Well, I was getting, once you get this started,
Yeah.
you say you take your transfer paper, just like I
Mhm.
do,
Mhm.
put it on it. Do you do that before you start laying your paint on?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And then do you start with your background weave?
I usually do. I usually start up at the left top, and I just often start laying it in little by little. But one thing you want to be sure and be careful about, you don't want to leave hard edges. You don't want to, like if you're laying this in or laying this in next to it, you want to kind of knit that together in a way to where you don't have a real hard line edge there, because life is a process of adjustments and painting is just like that. And so I know that when I put this stuff down here, it's not going to be correct the first time. And so what do they call that? Leveraging in business and pivoting. Basically, it's a lot like pivoting. And so I've got something down there. I've got it close to where I've got it pretty much in the ballpark, because I've done
Right.
my preliminary plans and study on this. I may depart from that, but unlikely that I'm going to that much. But say I do decide to move this whole thing over, down an inch or two, and I've done that kind of thing a lot over the years, like move everything, or maybe move this object here or there, completely move it over. You don't want a big ridge there that's gonna that you can't make it smooth, you know. So you've got to deal with that early on. And so, you know, like when I'm teaching art classes and drawing and stuff, I try to. It's interesting because you can tell right away the personalities of people. You can tell, like the movie The Matrix. It says you don't really know someone until you fight them or know how they fight. It's like that way with drawing. Drawing tells me a whole lot about the person, just a few seconds, how they make decisions in life.
Yeah.
If they just make a real hard line right there, I'm like, boy, that person has made makes a lot of mistakes in life. They're hasty. They jump into things, and that, you know, you can tell somebody that's much more conscientious, careful, like they're, you know, maybe not sure. It's a good idea, you know, highly recommend. I used to not be so much this type, but start out light and careful, because you're probably going to have, if you do that, then you can adjust. But a lot of times in life when we're young, we make a lot of real hard marks that we can't ever erase. And it's same on a painting or a drawing. If you make really hard, strong lines too early before you're sure of yourself and you've got everything mapped out, then you may have a mess.
I've always told people, I'd be curious if you agree with this opinion, and the most difficult thing about painting is knowing when to stop.
Mm-hmm. It is for me too, and Julie can attest to that I have a difficult time with that, especially because the amount of time investment with a lot of these things, sometimes I'm just sick of. I mean, really, sometimes it's difficult. Well, as I believe it was Degas that said, it's not difficult to maintain life in a 60-second or 60-minute drawing. The difficulty is maintaining it in a 60-hour. It's a psychological and a spiritual exercise, I believe, to and I don't really know how to put this into words exactly, but to have that engine, have that power sustained from the beginning to the end of a picture, and without it waning too much, to where that intensity, just like again in a song or in a picture, you may have somebody very very talented, very skilled, very knowledgeable. Maybe they've got a wall full of diplomas from all of these schools and stuff, and they understand music, but the music might be dead. And same with painting or any other kind of thing. And so I think that I try to balance those things. I'm trying to convey truth in a way, and I'm trying to deal with a lot of things. This is much more toward what we call objective, as opposed to non-objective art, but you know, abstract, modern, that sort of thing. But it's both, because and I try to make this a marriage of subjectivity and objectivity, because I'm having a subjective experience with an objective thing that I'm trying to tell the story very close to that objective reality, but it's still a subjective experience from my own limited perspective.
It is, but your goal is to represent it as objectively accurately, as accurately to the objective setup. You're trying to paint it to look exactly like your setup.
Usually.
And that's not all artists don't
Right.
do that.
There's a lot of that, but I'm also wanting to infuse it with how I feel about it, or want people to feel
I
about it
think
too.
you do.
Well, now Keith, when you're talking about moving that, and you talk about this hard line, could you go back to your bone you're talking about or not?
You could try that, but a lot of times it's just never gonna quite, that might help somewhat, but it's probably not ever gonna. Some things you kinda have to do right at the early stages of things, and you can make mistakes that can't really ever be fully corrected sometimes. Yes, ma'am?
So how do you know when you're done? Back to his
How do you
question.
know?
Because it's going to be a little bit different. If your painting looks like your setup, to whatever degree you would say it's done. But when you paint more out of your imagination, it's kind of, how do I know when I'm done?
It's the Chinese term of wu wei. I'm serious. It's instinctual, you know.
I tend to agree. I've been dabbling a little bit lately, and I kind of do that. Like, well, am I done? I don't know. And so I'll sleep on it and come back and look at it and think, yeah, I'm done, or no,
So,
I'm not.
sometimes I don't know that they actually are finished, but I think I've got to move on to my life,
He's
and
so
I've got to do something else.
It's
and
good
so-
enough and it's already pre-sold.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, I do. Yeah, I hope. I think, and this is something too. I tend to, as probably a lot of people do, is see what, especially when I'm in the middle of working on something, I tend to see everything that I think is wrong with it and the flaws. And but when I have some time away from it, like a lot of times you can ask Julie that I think this has been a complete failure. This whole thing, I've wasted all this time, and this thing is just a complete flop. It's a failure. It didn't do what I wanted at all. And then sometimes, so I'm just like, I gotta divorce myself from the thing, and just, I don't even wanna look at it or whatever. And then sometimes, well, I gotta get the thing framed. I've got this much time and money invested in everything. So I put it up, or whatever, and then, it's not that bad. And then I'd start warming to it more after I get some
Yeah,
space.
all
but-
my paintings get better after time.
Yeah.
It's like,
They
like, I
often-
go, look at this garbage, and then like a week later, I'm like, yeah,